God can prepare the opportunity, and you can still arrive too distracted to recognize it. Chosen one. That sentence may feel uncomfortable at first, but it carries more freedom than blame. Not every delay means rejection. Not every season of confusion means heaven became silent. And not every missed moment means something is wrong with your faith. Think about the last few weeks. You read the same paragraph twice. You open your phone for one small task and forget why you picked it up. An idea comes while you are driving, praying, showering, or lying awake at night. It feels important for a moment. Then another thought arrives, another message appears, and the idea is gone. You have probably blamed yourself for that. Maybe you called it laziness. Maybe you wondered if you were no longer sensitive enough to hear God clearly. But what if that explanation is incomplete? What if the issue is not only the signal? What if part of the issue is the condition of the receiver? There are two sides to receiving anything meaningful. There is what enters your life, and there is the state you are in when it arrives. A useful opportunity can appear while your mind is overloaded. A needed conversation can happen while you are half listening. A good idea can come while your attention is split across unfinished problems. Then the moment passes. You assume nothing happened. You keep asking God to make the path clearer and more obvious. But a louder signal does not solve everything if the receiver is exhausted. That is the first truth I want you to hold. You will see why sincere people can ask for direction and still filter out what matters. You will see why mental overload makes signal and noise harder to separate. And you will learn how to become more grounded without treating every coincidence like a prophecy. This is not about becoming superstitious. It is about becoming more responsible for your attention. Fear, expectation, and mental noise can quietly shape what you are able to recognize. Here is something useful you can do right now. Think of one thing from the last month that returned to your attention more than once. It could be a conversation, an idea, or a task you keep postponing. Do not call it a sign. Just notice that it keeps returning. Now ask yourself one question. Why have I kept dismissing this? Maybe it felt too ordinary. Maybe it required effort. Maybe it did not look like the answer you expected. Maybe it appeared when you were too tired to examine it carefully. That question changes the direction of your attention. If you keep asking why nothing has arrived, your mind searches for absence. If you ask what you may have overlooked, your mind begins to examine what is already present. It does not guarantee an answer, but it gives you a better place to stand. Chosen one, you may not need more signs. You may need a clearer way to recognize what deserves your attention. And before we go further, make one simple declaration. I am ready to see clearly, because there is a reason the things closest to us can become strangely hard to see. It begins when the mind decides too quickly that something does not matter. And once that pattern starts, you can walk past the beginning of an answer without knowing you did it. The hardest thing to miss is not always something hidden. Sometimes it is something visible that your mind has already decided does not matter. Chosen one, this is where the first real breakthrough begins. You may not be waiting for everything. You may be overlooking something that arrived in a form you did not expect. Think about how expectation works. You pray for a door, so you look for something that feels like a door. You ask for clarity, so you expect a powerful feeling. You ask for a new beginning, so you imagine a dramatic change. But sometimes, what arrives first is smaller. It may be a conversation, a repeated idea, a quiet invitation, or a discomfort you can no longer ignore. This is what I call the recognition gap. It is the distance between something entering your life and you recognizing why it deserves your attention. The wider it becomes, the easier it is to believe that nothing is happening. The common explanation sounds simple. If it were really meant for me, I would know immediately. But that assumption can become a blindfold. Important things do not always arrive with emotional certainty. Sometimes old expectations dismiss them before deeper attention has time to examine them. That does not mean every repeated thought is guidance. It does not mean every coincidence has meaning. Discernment requires more care than that. So here is a simple filter you can use. Ask 3 questions. Did this return more than once? Does it invite a constructive action instead of panic? Does it still feel worth examining after the emotion settles? Those questions slow you down. They remove pressure to label something immediately. You are not forcing an answer. You are deciding whether something deserves a second look. Imagine you have been asking for a career change. Then someone mentions a role in passing. You dismiss it because the title sounds ordinary. A week later, the same field comes up again. Then you see a course connected to it. None of those things proves anything alone. Together, they may deserve attention. The old pattern says, that is probably nothing. The new pattern says, I do not need to worship the pattern, but I can investigate it. That is agency. You can take one responsible step and see what becomes clearer. This matters because many people do the opposite. They wait for a feeling strong enough to erase doubt. They want certainty before movement. But life rarely works that way. Wisdom often becomes clearer after a grounded step, not before every step. If you are still here, you probably know this tension. You have sensed that something matters before you could explain why. The goal is to become more discerning. Write this into your mind. I do not need everything to look miraculous before I pay attention. I can notice what repeats. I can test what is constructive. I can wait for emotion to settle. Then I can decide what deserves action. Chosen one, this is the first shift. You stop asking only, where is the answer? You begin asking, what have I already dismissed because it looked too ordinary? That question can reveal more than another hour of searching. But expectation is not the only reason people miss what matters. There is another force that can distort recognition, even when your intentions are sincere. It happens when your mind carries too much for too long, until signal and noise begin to feel almost the same. When signal and noise begin to feel the same, people often blame their character first. They say they need more discipline. They say they need stronger faith. They tell themselves they should be able to focus if they really cared. But sometimes the problem is simpler. Your attention has been fragmented for too long. You know the symptoms. You read a sentence and realize none of it stayed. You start one task, notice another, then remember a third. By evening your mind feels full, but little feels complete. This matters spiritually too. You can pray while remembering 5 unfinished things. You can ask for direction while replaying yesterday and predicting tomorrow. You can search for clarity while feeding your mind more opinions and possibilities. Then the search itself becomes part of the noise. That is the hidden mechanism. An overloaded mind often responds to uncertainty by gathering even more input. You ask another person, you search another phrase, you replay the same choice from a new angle. For a moment, more information feels like progress. Eventually, it makes the signal harder to recognize. So deny the old explanation for a moment. You are not automatically lazy because your attention feels weak. You are not automatically failing spiritually because your thoughts scatter. Shame adds another layer of noise to a mind that already has too much. What do you do instead? Start with subtraction, just long enough to hear what remains when fresh input stops arriving. I want to give you a simple practice. For the next 24 hours, stop collecting new opinions about one decision that already matters to you. Do not ask another person about it. Do not search for another answer. Do not consume another message hoping someone will decide for you. Write down the 3 thoughts that keep returning without being invited. Then sleep before making a major decision if you can. This is not a spiritual test. It is a clarity test. You are creating enough space to notice what remains after stimulation drops. Some thoughts will fade, some fears will weaken, and the next responsible step may become easier to see. Notice the difference between pressure and clarity. Pressure says you must decide now or everything will disappear. Clarity can still be urgent, but it usually becomes more precise. Pressure multiplies possibilities. Clarity narrows attention toward one honest action. This is why more searching can become a trap. You think the next opinion will settle you. Then it creates two new questions. Eventually you are no longer discerning. You are consuming. Chosen one. There is a point where wisdom asks you to stop adding. Let the water settle. Let the emotional dust fall. Let the decision exist without being touched every 5 minutes. You may discover that what felt impossible to understand was simply surrounded by too much mental traffic. If this speaks to where you are, make this declaration. I choose clarity over noise. Say it as a boundary. I do not need another 100 voices before I can take one responsible step. There is still a deeper question underneath it. What happens when fragmentation has become your normal state? What happens when you remove the extra input and still feel like the receiver itself is tired? That is where we are going next. Because preparation is not only about the opportunity you hope will arrive, it is also about the condition of the person who has to recognize it, carry it, and respond when it finally stands in front of them. Chosen one. There is something deeper than waiting for the right opportunity. There is the condition you are in when that opportunity arrives. You can ask God for a door, but if your mind is exhausted, distracted, or divided, you may not notice what makes that door different from every other one. This is why preparation is not only about what you hope to receive. Preparation is also about capacity. A person can be sincere and still be too overloaded to recognize what deserves attention. A person can be faithful and still need rest, structure, and mental clarity before the next step becomes visible. Think about Joseph. His preparation did not begin when the position arrived. It was happening long before anyone could see what it was preparing him for. The point is not that every hardship is secretly a promotion. The point is that capacity often develops before opportunity becomes obvious. That changes the question. Instead of asking only, "What is God preparing for me?" ask, "What is being prepared in me so I can carry it well?" That question is quieter, it is less dramatic, but it gives you somewhere practical to work. I call this your receiver condition. It is the state of your attention, your judgment, your emotional steadiness, and your ability to notice what matters without being pulled apart by everything else. If the receiver is scattered, even a meaningful signal can feel ordinary. This is where many people become unfair to themselves. They treat every moment of fog like a spiritual failure. They assume more prayer should instantly remove mental fatigue. Prayer can ground you, guide you, and strengthen you. But a tired mind is still a tired mind, and wisdom does not require you to pretend otherwise. There is also a physical side to clarity that most spiritual conversations rarely address. Over the past few decades, researchers have studied how different parts of the brain cooperate during attention, creativity, learning, and decision-making. Later, I am going to return to one particular line of research because it raises an important question about the receiver itself. Do not accept any claim just because it sounds scientific. Listen to the mechanism. Look at what is actually being claimed. Then decide whether it makes sense for you. But hold this question while we continue. What if part of what you have been calling a spiritual failure also has a cognitive side you have never addressed? That possibility should not weaken your faith. It can remove unnecessary shame. It can help you stop blaming your character for every moment of mental fog. And it can remind you that caring for your mind is part of caring for the life you are trying to steward. Most people would have moved on before reaching this point. But staying here does not prove that you were destined to hear this. It simply means you are willing to examine the pattern instead of rushing past it. So, make a quiet declaration. I am willing to receive differently. I am willing to care for the receiver, not only search for the signal. I am willing to become more prepared inside, not only more hopeful about what might happen outside. But there is one danger here. Once people learn to pay closer attention, they can become obsessed with signs. They can turn discernment into anxiety. And if that happens, the receiver becomes noisy all over again. Paying attention is useful. Becoming afraid to miss anything is not. Chosen one. This is where discernment can quietly turn into hypervigilance. You start checking every coincidence. You replay every sentence. You wonder if every delay, number, dream, interruption, or feeling carries a hidden instruction. That does not create clarity. It creates pressure. And pressure can make ordinary events feel more meaningful than they are. A mind that is scared of missing guidance can begin manufacturing urgency where none exists. Discernment is calmer than that. It can tolerate uncertainty. It does not need every detail to become a sign. It gives an impression time to settle, and it asks whether the next action is responsible, constructive, and consistent with your values. Hypervigilance does the opposite. It demands certainty immediately. It keeps searching until something confirms the answer it already wants. It turns every new detail into evidence. Then anxiety starts wearing the clothes of intuition. So if you have heard many messages about divine timing, notice the difference here. Timing is not the central lesson today. Reception is. The question is not whether every moment has hidden meaning. The question is whether your current state helps you notice what actually deserves attention. Try something now. Bring one unresolved decision to mind. Do not solve it. Just notice what happens in your body when you think about it. Notice your breathing. Notice your jaw. Notice your shoulders. Notice whether your chest tightens or your thoughts speed up. Stay with that for a few seconds. Intensity is information, but intensity is not automatic confirmation. A strong feeling can come from wisdom. It can also come from fear, memory, pressure, or exhaustion. This is why grounded discernment requires space. You need enough distance to ask what remains true after the emotional wave passes. If the idea still seems constructive tomorrow, it deserves another look. If it only feels urgent while you are activated, that tells you something too. There is freedom in this. You do not have to decode your entire life. You do not have to become a detector for invisible messages. You can be attentive without becoming anxious. You can be spiritual without becoming superstitious. And here is the midpoint shift I want you to remember. What if the breakthrough is not learning to detect more signs, but becoming less noisy so fewer signs are needed? That changes everything. Instead of begging for louder direction, you begin reducing the conditions that distort direction. Instead of chasing confirmation, you build a state where one clear next step can be enough. Maybe you have already gone much farther than you think. Maybe you have done the praying, the reflecting, the learning, and the waiting. Maybe the remaining problem is not that you need another 100 pieces of information. Maybe you are standing in the last 10%. And the last 10% may be recognition. That is where we go next. Because there is a point where more effort stops helping. There is a point where preparation becomes less about searching and more about restoring the condition that lets you recognize what is already close. There comes a point when doing more no longer produces more clarity. Chosen one, you can pray more, research more, ask more people, and replay the same decision from 10 different angles. Yet, the answer can feel less clear than when you started. That is a clue, not a prophecy, not proof that some major event is about to happen. It is a clue about the condition from which you are trying to recognize what matters. This is where the last 10% begins. You may have already done the work. You may have learned the lesson. You may have become more patient, more careful, and more honest. But insight still has to become response. The hidden mechanism is simple. Opportunity requires recognition. Recognition requires enough clarity to separate what deserves attention from what is only noise. Then response requires enough steadiness to take a responsible step before every uncertainty disappears. I call the moment where those three things meet the meeting point: opportunity, readiness, and response. When they come together, movement becomes possible. Not because the future becomes guaranteed, but because you finally know enough to act wisely. Imagine a normal morning. An email arrives, a person follows up, an idea returns, a job listing appears, a conversation makes you think differently. None of those things needs to be miraculous. The shift is that you are clear enough to notice which one deserves another look, and calm enough to examine it before quickly dismissing it. That is what changed in the person you are becoming. You stop demanding drama before you pay attention. You stop dismissing ordinary beginnings. You stop asking for perfect certainty before taking a small, reversible step. This is also why I asked you earlier to remember the question about the receiver. There is a physical side to attention and mental clarity, and there is a line of research I promised to return to. I waited because a solution only becomes useful after you understand the shape of the problem it is meant to address. The question is not whether science can prove your calling. It cannot. The question is whether the condition of your mind affects your ability to focus, evaluate, decide, and respond. That part matters because every spiritual insight still has to pass through a human nervous system and a human brain. So, before we return to that research, make this declaration: I release the need for perfect certainty. I can take one responsible step without knowing the whole road. I can test what is constructive. I can pause what feels chaotic. I can move without pretending that every unknown has disappeared. Now hold one more question. Why does knowing all of this sometimes still fail to create movement? Why can a person understand the pattern, agree with the lesson, and still feel mentally stuck? The answer is not only in the ideas you have heard. Part of the answer may be in the receiver itself, and that is the missing piece we are about to examine. Because once you understand the problem clearly, the next question is no longer, what else do I need to know? The next question becomes, what supports the kind of clarity that lets what I already know become action? Why does insight sometimes remain insight, even after you understand what has been blocking you? Why can you recognize the pattern and still feel unable to move? Chosen one, this is where the missing piece comes into view. The problem is not always that you need more information. Sometimes the receiver itself needs support. You have already seen the pattern. Expectation can create blind spots. Mental overload can make signal and noise feel almost identical. Fear can make you search for certainty until you become less certain. That is the why. The practical answer is also clear. Reduce unnecessary input, test what repeats, let emotions settle, and take one responsible step at a time. And who are you becoming through that process? Not someone waiting for rescue, not someone chasing signs. You are becoming a clear receiver and a faithful steward. You are learning to notice what deserves attention, examine it without panic, and move without demanding that the entire road become visible first. But clarity alone is not movement. You can understand the mechanism and still feel foggy when it is time to decide. That is why I want to return to the research question I asked you to hold earlier. Dr. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize in 1981 for research involving the two hemispheres of the brain. That work did not prove any spiritual claim, and it did not prove that one audio track can unlock destiny. But it helped shape scientific understanding of how the hemispheres can contribute differently to cognition. The creators of a digital audio program I am about to describe build their explanation from that foundation. They say their goal is to support coordinated activity across both hemispheres through what they call neural sync technology. Their term for the intended state is whole brain activation. Those are product claims, and you should evaluate them as claims, not guarantees. A woman from California described feeling foggy, passive, and disconnected before using the program. According to her testimonial, she had already tried several practices and still felt mentally blocked. After using the program, she reported feeling clearer and more engaged with daily life. A man from Texas described a different version of the same problem. According to his testimonial, business and family responsibilities had continued while his mind felt dull and scattered. After using the program, he reported stronger clarity and better focus in everyday decisions. Those are personal accounts. They are not promises. Your experience may be different, but they explain the question behind the product. What if supporting the receiver could make it easier to use the clarity you already have? The product is called the Genius Switch. It is a digital 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. The routine is simple. You use headphones, close your eyes, relax, and listen once a day. The creators describe the sequence as using neural sync technology to support coordination between the two hemispheres. The Genius Switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who sees caring for the mind as part of caring for the life they are trying to steward. It is for someone willing to stop treating every moment of mental fog as a character flaw. You do not need this product to be faithful. You do not need it to receive guidance. Buying it does not guarantee any opportunity, relationship, financial result, or spiritual outcome. It belongs in this conversation for a simpler reason. It is one optional tool aimed at supporting the receiver we have been discussing. According to the current product page, the regular listed price is $49. The page also presents an offer of $39. It includes 4 digital bonuses, a guided visualization, a grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a printable guide built around 5 habits. The page also states that buyers receive lifetime access and a money-back guarantee. Because offers can change, read the current terms yourself before deciding. Do not buy because you fear missing a blessing. Buy only if the mechanism, format, price, and terms make sense to you. The official resource is linked in the description and pinned comment, where you can review the details yourself. A tool does not replace God. A tool does not replace obedience. It cannot surrender for you, choose for you, or take the next faithful step for you. What it can do, if it works well for you, is support the mental condition from which you notice, evaluate, and act. And that returns us to the deeper current of this message. No tool can make the final response in your place. The last barrier may not be permission. It may be the belief that you must feel completely certain before you move. That is the barrier we break next. Because there is a difference between reckless action and a responsible step. Once you understand that difference, you stop waiting for perfect certainty before doing what is already clear enough to begin. Chosen one. There is a moment when waiting stops being wisdom and starts becoming fear in a quieter form. It does not look dramatic. It sounds responsible. It says you just need one more sign, one more confirmation, one more night to think, one more person to agree. But sometimes you are not waiting for permission. You are waiting for certainty. And certainty can become a hiding place. If you require every unknown to disappear before you move, you can stay still forever while calling the stillness discernment. This is the final barrier. You already know how to reduce noise. You know how to test what repeats. You know that strong emotion is not automatic guidance. Now you need to know when enough clarity is enough to take one responsible step. Here is the hidden mechanism. Fear wants the whole road. Wisdom usually gives you the next piece. Fear asks for guarantees. Wisdom asks whether the next action is aligned, responsible, and grounded. Fear says do nothing until nothing can go wrong. Wisdom knows that mature action still carries uncertainty, so use a simple test. Ask whether the next step matches your values. Ask whether it is responsible. Ask whether the risk is appropriate. Ask whether the step still makes sense after emotion settles. Then ask whether you can take the smallest useful version of it within the next day or two. Maybe the step is sending the email. Maybe it is making the call. Maybe it is researching the opportunity instead of fantasizing about it. Maybe it is setting the boundary you have delayed. Maybe it is saying no to something that keeps draining the receiver you are trying to restore. Notice what this test does. It does not promise the outcome. It does not label your choice as divine. It simply moves you from endless interpretation into grounded action. That is where clarity becomes useful. The person you are becoming does not chase signs. You do not ignore intuition either. You let impressions settle, you test them, and you act responsibly when enough becomes clear. You no longer need panic to make a decision feel important. You also stop calling fear discernment. That matters. Fear often sounds intelligent because it can produce 10 reasons to wait. But if every reason leads back to the demand for perfect certainty, the pattern deserves examination. The resource I mentioned earlier remains in the description and pinned comment if you want to review it for yourself. There is no need to force a decision. The larger point is still the same. A clearer receiver matters because every meaningful next step still has to be recognized and chosen. And this is where the title finally begins to turn. Maybe you almost moved past something important before. Maybe you missed a conversation, an idea, or an opportunity. That does not mean you missed your life. You are not being asked to recover every old moment. You are being asked to become more available to the next one, more attentive, more grounded, more willing to act when the next step is clear enough. So hold this sentence before we close. Clarity is not seeing the entire road. Clarity is knowing enough to take the next faithful step. And before this message ends, I want to speak one final declaration over the person who has spent too long believing they missed their moment. Chosen one, before you leave this moment, let your body become still. Put the phone down if you can. Breathe slowly. Imagine a quiet hallway in front of you. You do not see 100 doors. You do not see the entire road. You see only enough space for the next step. That is all you need to hold. Now, bring one decision to mind. Not the biggest decision of your life. Just one thing that has been waiting for your attention. See it without forcing an answer. Let the noise around it become quieter. Tell yourself this: I do not need panic to guide me. I do not need complete certainty to move wisely. I can be calm and still pay attention. I can be grounded and still respond. Feel your breathing slow down. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest. The goal is not to create a mystical feeling. The goal is to remember what it feels like when your body is not being pushed by urgency. Now return to where we began. You almost moved past this message, but the deeper lesson was never about proving that this moment was sent to you by God. The deeper lesson is about how easily ordinary moments can be dismissed before you give them a second look. Underneath everything is one simple truth. You do not need a louder life. You need enough clarity to recognize what deserves your attention. So release the fear that you have missed everything. Release the shame attached to old decisions. Release the need to decode every coincidence. Release the belief that confusion proves you are waiting correctly. You are allowed to become quieter. You are allowed to become clearer. You are allowed to take one responsible step without seeing the whole road. And you are allowed to trust that one missed moment does not define your entire future. God, thank you for wisdom that meets us where we are. Thank you for the ability to learn, to notice, to correct, and to begin again. Give us discernment without fear, attention without obsession, and courage without recklessness. And chosen one, make this declaration with intention. I am attentive. I am discerning. I am grounded. I do not need fear to make me vigilant. I do not need confusion to prove that I am waiting. I can recognize what deserves my attention. I can test what I feel. I can let emotion settle. I can take the next faithful step before I can see the entire road. I am not living as someone abandoned by direction. I am becoming a clear receiver and a faithful steward. I will not miss my next faithful step. If that is the decision you are making today, place those words in the comments. I will not miss my next faithful step. Maybe you almost moved past this message. But the greater lesson is not about this message at all. It is about how many ordinary moments in your life deserve a second look before you decide they mean nothing. Stay clear, stay grounded, pay attention to what deserves attention, and take the next faithful step when it becomes clear enough to begin. Amen.